So Black Mage 7.2 changes made people set some places on fire probably, and not with the fire of Black Mage. Or maybe not. Maybe people have been overall more positive about it and put the fires out with throwing ice at it. Anyone who knows me knows I am a Dragoon main through and through, even after they made the terrible choice of removing 2 Nostrons.
I miss my wife, Tails. I miss her a lot. I'll be back.
So why am I here? Black Mage has been a more like novelty to me. In casual content back in Heavensward, I considered it a secondary or tertiary job. I liked the job, thought it was cool, but never made deeper dives into it. This has continued up to current day. I think Black Mage is cool. It's cool when a player has mastery on it, but I am far from any sort of main of Black Mage. It's a job I liked all iterations of, but bounced from competent to bad at depending on how much effort I was putting in per expansion. Much to the chagrin of all the gatekeepers, I would say this makes me a better pair of eyes for looking at it than most mains. I get the frustration of losing out on super cool min-maxing tools, but that's not inherent design to the job. I get being frustrated this time they did mess with the inherent design to the job, but there's a shocking amount of mains who are gatekeeping non-mains of having any opinions. Even the ones who are outright agreeing with every problem those mains have with the job changes. But that could just be a Reddit thing. You don't need to main the job to be good at it or enjoy it. That's the space I usually occupy. I may not be amazing, but I'll run circles around 75% of the player base on any job. I can tell you what I do or do not like about any job. Sometimes that's even what makes a job unique. But I'll not say they should remove that aspect unless it's expedient. Black Mage is no different in that aspect. So as a person who wears their biases on their sleeves, but is somehow less biased, I threw my hat in the ring to get feedback on the job from players of all types. I put together a short survey about the changes and how people are feeling about them. Here I'm going to go over the results, with a couple of modifiers thrown in for specific results I wanted to see. I'll be discussing the results along with a variety of topics about the job and the wider game as a whole. Often it comes back to players and their opinions. If you enjoyed this video or want to see more, please go smash that like button. Or just lightly click it. Subscribe to me to see videos in your sub box. You can also go follow me on the socials or on Twitch where I stream a variety of games with similarly shown opinions on my sleeves. Without further ado, let's get on to the results. Before I opened up the survey to Reddit, I posted it on my Patreon, channel page, and community Discord. This got me to 200 results exactly. We're not going to spend too much time on this specific subset of results before going to the wider results. This will work best as an overview of the questions I asked. To start, obviously gotta ask if people were mains. Even if non-mains are allowed to answer and have their own opinions on the internet of all places, it makes sense to gauge where people are at. We have nearly 50-50 with a slight edge to non-mains. I then go to asking on how much Black Mage has been played post-changes. This survey was created 2 weeks into the patch, which gave people a week to get into Savage and really push how the job feels to play now. I kept numbers relatively low, because people might play lots of jobs, or just not have a lot of time to play. Some people may only get 10 hours a week to play, if that. Again, playtime and skill level are not the same, even if you could find a correlation. Less than half of players played more than 10 hours, which could just be the split between mains and non-mains. I also made sure to add options for people who have not even touched the changes, both because of not spending time on it, and because of refusing to spend time on it as an act of protest. Later we'll see a significant number of these players did not read the questions. Similarly rated from mains to non-mains is, what is the hardest content played as Black Mage in 7.2? About half of all players did not play anything harder than casual content. The other half is split between not playing the job at all to content of extreme and higher. I made sure to also split off anyone who cleared this tier week 1. This shows you the super hardcore players. Player data collection complete, I moved into opinions. I asked outright, do you like the changes? I gave an in-between because there can be parts of the changes you like, with other changes you do not like. They did make a lot of changes. There being a pretty clean split between all 3 answers is not entirely surprising to me. Separate to whether you like the changes is whether the devs achieve their goal. The full quote on the patch notes reads as follows. Future battle design may cause difficulty with casting spells, so we have shortened the cast time for a variety of actions. Furthermore, the effect expiration of Astral Fire and Umbral Ice has been largely detrimental to attack power in situations where players must interrupt casting to address battle mechanics. For this reason, these statuses will no longer expire. So how well did they achieve this goal with such sweeping changes on a scale of 1 to 10? Rather than going over the full list of numbers, I will say that this top part here is just ratings of 8, 9, and 10. The darker green opposite of 8 is the 4 rating. So people think they were pretty successful. Also separate to if you like the changes is if you think they were good for the job. You can hate how they change a job, but think it did improve the job in some ways. There was a surprising increase in positivity for this question, as I would expect the people who voted no for liking the changes would be hard stuck in that vote. But the no votes went down, at least in this pool. The next two questions are pretty tightly connected. First is if people intend to still play Black Mage going forward. If you already have the job at 100, there's little to no reason to play if you don't like it after all. Surprisingly, only about 20% are a firm no. This leads into the more specific question of if you will main the job after this. No surprise, the number of mains dropped by a good few percentage points. Finally, before the open answer portion where I let people give their reasons or vent, is about the future of the job. How do we want the job to change in 8.0? Bigger changes than this? Revert to the old style? Or keep it around this spot, even if what around this spot could take many forms? The surprising bit is how small the reversion group is. Even for all the people who hate the changes, all the mains who still main the job but wish it didn't get changed, less than a third want it to be reverted. Now let's move on to the full set of responses with the Reddit wave thrown in. I'll also be giving my own thoughts this go around. We're close to 1,000 responses, and the numbers definitely shifted a bit. Starting with the mains, it's even more 50-50 with a slight edge to those that main the job now. How much did people play? The average playtime went way up, and so did the amount of players who vehemently refused to play this new incarnation of Black Mage. With making the new 1 to 100 guide video, I sit only in the some category. Hard to play Black Mage when I'm too busy doing Savage on my main, which obviously means I only did normal content, didn't take it into extreme. Also expected is that the results have trended higher tier content-wise. Far more players doing extreme and harder. We went from just normals being nearly half the votes, to normals and not playing not even hitting the same percentage of players. Decent amount of week 1 clearers too. As far as whether or not I like the changes, I think overall I do, but I might also lean toward in between. So the opposite of what happened with the results. More people both like and dislike the changes, with less people voting they're in the middle. Looking at the long-form feedback both in the forum and on the Reddit post, this is actually shocking to me. Overall, I would put the job changes into 2 categories, speed and stress. These two are often one and the same when it comes to Black Mage, but I'm sure most people understand where I'm coming from here. We have the GCD reductions near across the board, not you AoE, and the removal of timers. The people in between tend to say they like one of the things or the other. Keep one of the changes, revert the other. Some people really like how Black Mage GCD timers are standardized now, while hating that the Astral Fire and Umbral Ice timer is gone. Others are the reverse, wanting the timer to stay gone while going back to the slower speed of the job. When it comes specifically to the removal of Firestarter and Thunderhead timers, people seem to really lean on that either being an unimportant change or the one they would keep even if they reverted part of the changes. The timers barely came into play to begin with, so it doesn't matter which direction they took here. The surprises continue with whether or not the devs succeeded in their goals. More than half of responders gave the rework an 8 or higher if they were successful. Only about a quarter of responders rated 5 or below even. People truly think that, even if they do not like the changes, the devs were right on target for making Black Mage able to handle coming content. This is in comparison to if they did not change the job. I would have to agree. This patch, Black Mage could definitely handle all of the fights without the changes, except maybe M5S. Future patches, the all-too-consuming need for harder and more complex content makes me worry whether casters in general would be able to handle it. These changes definitely put Black Mage in a position to handle basically anything. My mind constantly flitters back to my class warfare video and how there is a subset of players who say we need ultimates to be harder than top. Top needs to be superseded in difficulty. How hard can we make things before casters become unable to exist? From what I remember, Looper into Pantocrator required Black Mages to be near perfect in everything they did to get through the mechanics. How do you play Black Mage in something harder than that? More consistently movement heavy than that? Keep pushing it and eventually even perfect play will force you into using Scathe of all things. How far can they push the content before the job design can't keep up? This is a complaint that keeps getting louder as things progress. Job design and encounter design are growing incompatible when you look at it the right way. Though I kinda don't see it. In the case of mages, I can sort of see it because movement locks. As a Dragoon main, I never said animation locks were bad and needed to be fixed. I always said if you got into mechanics trouble from hitting jump at a bad time, that was a skill issue. In some cases, tank skill issue because they should be moving the boss to begin with. This is true to this day, especially with stuff like Winged Glide in our kit now. While I hold no specific wish to get Heavensward job design back, I do not see how most would be incompatible with current fight design. I do not like something like Bow Mage, but if the mages can exist, so can Bow Mage. It isn't like they couldn't add a skill called Freestyle, which is the Bow Mage version of Triple Cast. To this day, the biggest loss we've had is the Heavensward and Stormblood era of Astro. Astrodyne? She's a skill that I'm glad is gone. Royal Road Astro? Genius and amazing fun. But much like a lot of things, they didn't remove the cool cards because of encounter design. We lost them because everyone complained that the only good card was the balance. So they gave us nothing but the balance and every card being a damage boost. Which all comes to my current point. What are the ultimate reasons we got to this point? Yoshi P said that the game not having enough friction back in Endwalker, and how they would bump up the difficulty for Dawntrail. Even in casual content, I feel like they've been doing that. The current raid tier definitely hit that mark, and a lot of what made last tier so especially easy was Pictomancer being busted. It comes back to their given reason of that they do not think Black Mage can handle future content. This is presumably the same dev team that got so good at P8S that they made the DPS check too tight and had to nerf it. Yoshi P mains Black Mage himself, though he may play Picto more in his personal time. So where are these changes coming from? Is this truly the whole answer? They do try to be pretty open with answering questions and all, but a lot of the time, it feels like we're not being given enough information. Did player feedback at all come into play in this case? When does it? How does it? Etc. There's theories and such that it's all player statistics that determine when they make these changes. Is it true, and why do they design at all with this in mind? There are a ton of possible answers and problems here, and that's where my mind spins in circles. I don't subscribe to only one of these being the answer for everything. A lot, and I mean a lot of the homogenation we got is broadly due to high-end players, but it's not all because of them. Black Mage changing in this way was not high-end players, but also in a way it was. From a lot of players and places, I saw a lot of people constantly down-talking Flare Star. Not just because the potency was too low, but because it was too inflexible, or too punishing. Which, like, skill issue? Is this not exactly what Black Mage players wanted? You need to get 6 Fire 4s or lose out on the big finisher. That's a skill issue if you don't. It was a common complaint I saw a lot of. If making the potency higher isn't enough to make the skill not suck, since Black Mage was struggling next to Pictomancer even in full uptime, then fundamentally, get 6 Fire 4s and cast a finisher was too much. Needing to do the exact same Astral Fire phase we've been doing since Heavensward, but with one more is too restrictive? I would constantly put forward that fixing the potency would fix the main problem with the skill, but then would get no further elaborating on what would fix the skill, only that it should be removed. I still, to this day, do not understand how Flare Star wasn't exactly the kind of skill that slotted into Black Mage perfectly. My own confusion aside, these changes all massively fix all possible issues I could see with the skill. It didn't refresh the Astral Fire timer, which is now gone anyway. You can't fail to get 6 stacks of Astral Soul unless you're playing the job wrong at a fundamental level. It had a slow cast time, and now it's a normal cast time. It truly is just a finisher now. Like, maybe in any comments you leave, you can also maybe enlighten me as to why the skill was bad? Or are you just as confused as me? Because every negative I see here is just something that has been core to the job, and why people even dislike the changes in 7.2. Back to the questions, we have if people think the changes are good for the job. This one I am not sure on. I would probably be in between. I like the changes, I feel like they were inevitable, and the job still feels fun to me. But the job definitely has lost a core bit of its identity. Jobs are allowed to be unique, even if in ways that are unfun to most people, so long as there is a group that enjoys how it plays. It is very easy to see why people like this current incarnation though. Even if a huge part of the core of Black Mage is gone, much of it does still remain. It's a much easier version of the same general motions. Compared to the smaller pool, much more people are firmly no than in between. This isn't surprising to me, except for that I would have thought there would be more no votes, more mains and all, with more extreme opinions hitting the forum. Do people intend to continue to play Black Mage? Between the part of the core that remains and the people upset at the changes, I am shocked that this is almost exactly the same results as the smaller pool. Obviously, I'll still play it as I play everything, but it isn't my caster of choice. Red Mage and Summoner are what I go for. Which, asking if these people are Black Mage mains, the percentage actually went up compared to the smaller pool. It's still an 11% loss compared to the people who mained it before the patch. If the devs truly had any thought in their minds that this would increase Black Mage play count, I have my doubts their data is going to show that happening. But obviously, most players probably don't see these videos or go to stuff like Reddit, so who knows overall. Finally, are people hoping for reversions or bigger changes? About the same split as the smaller pool, with it being fairly even across all three options. Keeping it around the current spot is the biggest by a wide margin, but it still is the minority. People who want a different Black Mage are the majority, even if they do not agree on what that form should be. Honestly, I'm not sure what form Black Mage should take going forward. If content is truly going to make the original design impossible to handle, then it has to change like it has, right? So what should Black Mage become, if anything? Even if it is a Summoner case where I fully think the new Summoner is just better than old Summoner, how do you make Black Mage feel like a Black Mage in a different way? Jobs are supposed to be different. I still maintain that things aren't as homogenized as people act. Somehow every melee plays the exact same way, for example. No, that's not how things have gotten. Even for what Black Mage has become, it still is very unique next to the other mages. The slow cast time is gone, but there's plenty that remains unique. People constantly rag on the changes as being an excuse to remove anything that makes jobs unique on purpose. That's hyperbolic, even if they're trying to make things more approachable for casual players. The given purpose for this specific one is so that Black Mage is viable in all content, which is something they've been trying to do for years. For good reason too, because the old quote remains true, players will optimize the fun out of their game. I still remember Extremes blocking Samurai out of their parties in Stormblood. I still remember Dark Knights being considered bad too. I remember so many complaints being framed from an optimization mindset. They may miss the mark a lot with actually getting things properly balanced, but they definitely are trying, because people would exclude the jobs otherwise. If Black Mage became unviable in even just one fight of a tier, one specific fight, and not even all of them, the backlash would be huge. Jobs having a specific niche they fit is something players do not want. We can see this even in Dawntrail thanks to M3S, a fight that was completely physical based, and a loud minority complaining that it's bad that some tanks aren't as good in this fight. On one hand, yeah, that is bad because people choose mains for a reason. I'm a Dragoon main. I could play Viper, and even did last tier. Might bring my ult back up to snuff to redo this tier on Viper. I can play Reaper, and did the first tier in Endwalker. That one I at least do not have to get a second gear set for, but neither of those are Dragoon. I'm not playing the main I constantly come back to. I also might not even like other jobs. If my job isn't good here, I not only might have to get new gear for this other fight, I need to play a job I hate. That's another reason they try to keep everything viable. We can easily be everything on one character, but we shouldn't have to. If we want to main a job, we should be able to main a job. Slight edges in some fights are fine, but overwhelming superiority is often seen as bad, even if it is just one fight. On the other hand, we have Pictomancer. A job that is still stupidly strong in downtime-based fights, and still really strong in full uptime post-nerf. All jobs either have to be pushed in line to be equally good in both full uptime and heavy downtime, or some jobs are going to be superior for specific content. That heavily constrains design, making sure the gulf isn't too huge. So that's what they aim to do. Everything is viable. Or they would get tons of complaints that a specific job isn't viable. People seem to agree Machinist is currently struggling, but it is still viable. I don't know how widespread it is that people complain that M3S had objectively worse tanks for it, but look at how basically all tank skills are good for both physical and magical damage, and you have your answer. Dark Mind can't exist as just a magical skill, it must be useful for all damage. So in a world where Black Mage is truly dead in the water for some fights to keep it unique, players would simply hate it for forcing them to not be Black Mage in that specific fight. People would lock it out for being so bad, especially if the job just can't beat the DPS check when included. Who would bring multiple jobs except for top tier static players and a very small number of PF warriors? Much of PF can't even swap between Healer 1 and Healer 2, or insist that Healer 2 must always be the shield healer, simply because the raid plan used it like that, and definitely wasn't chosen arbitrarily, and for consistency across the entire raid plan. The general player base would burn down the official forums and Reddit simultaneously. And this all just loops back to fight design. Again, I do not think that even Heavensward era jobs couldn't handle most fights these days. I don't even think they were all that more complex in most cases. But here we are, with the idea that fights are being made harder in exchange for easier jobs. So what's the call here? Could there have been a world where we get both? Complex jobs and complex fights. What led to this insistence that we can't have both, and the seeming assumption that players would rather the fights than the jobs? Much of the homogenization we've seen has been player-asked, but the idea we can't have other complexity isn't. Anyway, a topic I have nowhere else to cleanly fit in this video is Black Mage AoE. What's the threshold to make Highfire in Blizzard 2 worth it? Let's be real, nothing about Black Mage AoE is broken. The fact that it's not optimal to use those skills is, in a backwards logic sort of way, intended by design. No, I'm not saying they purposefully made them bad, but that optimal play is left to the players to figure out. Black Mage and non-standard play is the proof of the disconnect between intended design and optimal play kicking in. AoE being as it is because Flare Star is just that good, especially after the buffs. Without re-nerfing the skill, how far do you have to bring the normal AoE skills up to be worth using and losing Flare Stars per second? The difference is huge. I believe I saw it's 28% better to not use those two. That's going to mean a massive buff to make it worth it. Now let's move on to subsets of data and the results of those. This is where the truly interesting stuff comes in. We're going to start with splitting up the people who main the job and those who do not main the job. Out of the 953 responses, 485 of them consider themselves mains of the job. Almost half of them played a lot of the job in the 2 weeks before this went live. About 13% didn't play the job at all in those 2 weeks, with more than 10% of mains giving up on the job entirely. However, about 4% of responders don't know how to read questions and claim to have played Black Mage in 7.2 in the very next question. As we all know, Final Fantasy XIV players can't read. This bit proves that a significant group of players truly can't read. Unsurprisingly, nearly half of all mains do not like the changes. The remaining 50% is close to evenly split between enjoying the changes and probably mostly those who like parts of the changes. Despite these numbers, more than 40% of the responders think that the devs hit their goal on the mark. That's just the 8, 9, and 10 voters. Add in the people who voted even a 7, and more than half of voters think they accomplished their goals with making Black Mage able to handle future content. Less surprising is whether or not people think the changes were good for the job. It's pretty evenly split, with a small lead in the no group. For players who intended to continue to play Black Mage, about 60% of players will play Black Mage in future. Weirdly though, more people consider themselves Black Mage mains than people who will continue to play Black Mage. Maybe this is people who quit and refuse to play anything but Black Mage? Overall though, only 37.5% of mains intend to drop it as their main. Finally is whether people want a reversion bigger changes, or to keep it around this design spot. It's pretty expected that most players want it reverted or pushed to much further changes. I kind of expected keeping it around this design spot to be a much smaller group. Even if they liked the changes, I figured nearly everyone would not want it to stay this way. On the other side of the coin is the 468 people who do not main Black Mage. Half of players played anywhere over 10 hours, while the single largest group played less than 10 hours, but still played it. As far as content they play, no surprise that half of the players only played casual content. More surprising is the amount of people who played it in extremes or higher. That's a decent group. In theory to the player base, these changes are for the casuals and making Black Mage more accessible. Well, only half of the non-mains even like these changes, but again, these votes are not the majority of the player base. As for if responders think these changes hit the dev intended mark, more than 60% of non-mains think they did. Add in the 7s, and more than 75% of them are positively viewing the changes in this specific way. Similar is whether people think the changes were good for the job. Very few did not think these changes are good in any way. So in a way, maybe the casual goal is also being hit. Do people intend to play Black Mage more after this? Yeah, overwhelming majority still have interest in the job, though only 16% of the people intend to now main the job. So it did gain a fair few mains, but not enough to offset the ones we lost from those who used to main it. Finally, about 40% of players want the job reverted to the original design. Alright, rapid fire for the next few sections. I then split up groups based on whether they think the devs did a good job on hitting their goals. The groups are ratings 1 to 5 and 6 to 10, so a split of yes and no, rather than yes, maybe, and no. Only a very small 257 responders said it was a 5 or below, with half of those people voting 4 or 5 if I did split in a maybe way. The vast majority of these players were mains, and a large amount of people who did not even play the rework. Very few players did not do harder content, which really puts to the test whether they succeeded. It's the hard content where these changes matter. The hard content where being viable is an actual concern. So to me, this says that most of these people agree with my earlier sentiment. I do not see how pre-7.2 Black Mage could not do this tier. Also naturally, most of the players hate the changes and do not think the changes were good for the job. A large group of the players do not intend to play Black Mage anymore, and even more, no longer count themselves as mains. Finally, 2/3 of these players are the ones wishing for a reversion. 698 people voted a 6 or higher. Nearly 75% of them voted an 8 or higher. Most of these players do not main it, but a good amount do, so it's not all the non-mains. Most players also had decent playtime. A lot of these players did not do anything but casual content, yet we still have 13 people who say they cleared this tier week 1. Clearing week 1 and thinking the devs did well in their goals. Again, liking the changes is separate, but half of them do like the changes, with an even larger group thinking the changes are good for the job. Almost 80% will continue to play the job, and a few more people actually consider themselves mains compared to before the changes. Finally, most want to keep these changes or want it to be pushed even further. Very few people want it reverted. Next, I want to poke at the people who claim they did not play Black Mage in 7.2, most of them refusing to play it, and an almost equal amount of them were mains. And nearly 40% of them can't read. You can't not play Black Mage and also play it in 7.2, pick one. Overwhelmingly, these people do not like the changes. As far as rating the changes, people are all over. It's overall evenly split across the board, and people do not think the changes were good. Very few people are intending to continue playing the job, with almost all of them giving up on the job entirely. No surprise, they want things reverted. Finally, I want to look at the people who do Savage and Ultimate. Not even extreme, just the stuff considered hardcore. 39 people claim to have cleared this tier week 1, with varying levels of content and progress besides. It's no surprise that most of these players were mains going into this. Given these are hardcore players, it's no surprise that most of them have a good number of hours in the job. The split of whether people like the changes is a lot more down the middle than you would expect. A lot of these players actually like the changes outright, and rate them highly as far as dev intentions. This continues into them thinking the changes are good for the job. So maybe I am wrong about Black Mage not needing these changes for this tier? More people think these were needed than this Black Mage pleb would know? Most players here do intend to continue to play the job in future, and almost just as many will still main it. So the hardcore fans didn't see as huge a hit as most might expect. Finally, whether or not we're hoping for reversions or such, it's again pretty split down the middle. So yeah, that's the results, that's where my scatterbrained thoughts are going. There might be some huge surprises in these results for you, but also, do not assume these results apply to the whole of the player base. Once again, most players probably do not look at videos or Reddit or anything. Even if there's a lot of us, we are a very small portion of players. 1,000 is a lot of people, but is also very tiny next to whatever the game's true population is. This is going to be a bit of an awakening for anyone who believes that everyone loves it, or hates it, or whatever. At least in these circles, it's a lot more split or even positive than you might think. Your opinions are still yours, are still valid. Just don't think you're alone or the only opinion that is happening. Either way, I wanted to be a more middle-of-the-road opinion on this to bring this out. Not someone endlessly devoted to the job who will probably hate the changes, or someone who entirely loves them. Anyway, thanks again for joining along. Feel free to inform me of where I am wrong and vent your frustrations. Feel free to join me along my socials and Twitch and all that stuff, or join my Patreon and make me feel more guilty for not doing more for them. Take care and may the power of an ended hog slay waste to your enemies.